I'm talking with Chai and Lauren here today about the new assistant experience in Glean and how we're making it more agentic and personalized under the hood. Thanks for joining us. So most assistants today feel like a day one hire, right? They're dropped in, they have no context about your projects, your teams, or how work actually gets done at your company. That's the context gap that's holding enterprise AI back.
And this, by the way, I think has been my implicit difficulty with other AI products of all classes. It's not that they don't work, but it takes a lot of work for me actually to actually provide all that context to make it work. And I think the really cool thing about Glean is we're able to flip that, where Glean instead adapts to you and to your context and you yourself as a user to answer questions for you.
Yeah, exactly. And the enterprise graph is exactly how we do that, what's closing that context gap, right? So it's connecting these scattered dots, turning what you and your coworkers are doing around your company into a living model. And that's how Glean does exactly what Chai described, how it lifts that responsibility away from the user to write a lot of things into their query, but it just understands what you're trying to say, how you're going to solve your problem. And we don't stop at the enterprise level. Lauren, I know you've been working on the personal knowledge graph as well.
Yeah, so every employee gets their own personal graph, and it's a private model of the projects, collaborators, and communication style. It powers a personal work assistant that helps people prioritize their work and get it done their way. And the great thing is every graph is someone's own. It's not anybody else's.
Yeah, so we're already seeing this investment in the enterprise graph, the personal graph show up in our assistant experience. So that's where our newest agentic architecture knows how to make use of both of those graphs in concert and in sequence with many other tools. With that, I'll hand it to Chai to talk a little bit more about that architecture.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. So when we set out to build and evaluate the latest version of the Glean Assistant, we weren't looking for any incremental improvements. We were really trying to tackle what are some of the hardest questions in the enterprise. Things that don't just need a few documents or us, the user specifying it, but actually needs large swaths of context across your messaging apps, code, calendar, whatever it might be, to actually iteratively search all of that, put it together, and deliver a high quality answer.
And that's really similar to how people would actually go and solve those problems, right? They'll go through some context, find a clue, use that clue to find more clues until it leads them to the answer.
Yeah, no, exactly. And following that paradigm has shown not just like great quality improvements in our internal evals and judges, but actually when you look at our actual end user feedback and the downvotes we've seen in the products, there's a class of about around 20% of these downvotes which were just totally unaddressable until we changed to this new architecture. And I think that's the biggest jump we've ever seen.
Yeah, and that kind of increase in capabilities leads to more trust and usage. We're internally, once we switched all of our internal Gleanies over to this new architecture, we saw them issuing 21% more queries. So it all kind of comes together neatly there.
And I know it's going to sound like marketing, but really people are super happy internally about it. But what's interesting is why did we see this massive jump in performance? So first, it's a much stronger orchestrator, continuously planning and replanning across a set of very high quality tools that Glean has built over many years, and supplying the agent with all that context from one's calendar, structured data, code, and again, putting that together to deliver a high quality answer. Second, the Agentic Engine is way better able to make use of the enterprise graph, which, as Eddie alluded to, is this pre-synthesized authoritative data that Glean has already compiled from all of your data that allows the agent to not have to always learn things from scratch on the fly, but instead use this to deliver, again, faster and higher quality answers. And beyond just major general information seeking wins, we see this play out in all sorts of queries, whether it's code queries, debugging, as Lauren also alluded to earlier, complex data analysis. But I'd love, Eddie, if we just showed everyone an example.
Yeah, definitely. So this example we have here today is actually from earlier this week. I was debugging with a fellow engineer on, we were trying to understand why, a given experiment, an A/B experiment we had wasn't taking place, right? It didn't seem like it was active in customers. And so I was both trying to sort of diagnose this specific issue and help give him an overview, maybe even refresh myself on how, the life cycle of our experiment framework works. So here's the query, right? We're linking the pull request where we've landed the experiment config, it's been merged, and we're trying to understand, how to debug why it's not happening. So the first thing that our new assistant experience is going to do is it's going to read that pull request and use that to adaptively understand, okay, what do I need to go search for? What clues did that give me? Like Lauren mentioned, this is much how a human debugging this would act, right? How do I read that and understand where to go from there? So after it's read this pull request, it's formulating this sort of debugging plan. You can see from these reasoning summaries kind of what it's thinking about. And then it's going to issue a Glean search to gather a bunch more information from across Glean.
And like, so these specifically, it's not just pull requests, but it's actually, I see Google Docs, Confluence, and all these other documentation.
Exactly. So it's not just sort of previous pull requests that are like mine, but also, as Chai mentioned, this documentation. Sometimes, though, the documentation might be stale or sort of out of date, and so this architecture actually, with the reasoning orchestrator is able to deduce, hey, I feel like I don't have the full picture here. I actually want to go look at source code, and so after it's gathered that first batch of context, it's then going to actually decide to use our code search tool and go read actual source code and understand the logic, not that's just documented, which might or always realistically is missing something, but the code is that source of truth, right? And so it's able to read the source code and actually then synthesize a more exhaustive response that kind of lays out every single thing, right? So the response here is talking about our specific PR that we landed, what kind of parameters it has. It gives me an overview of the life cycle, right, from when I've merged that PR to when I would expect it to be live.
Oh, wow.
And it's giving me a bunch of tips on exactly how to confirm this, right? This is a lot to read. So as we go down to the sort of bottom here, we can see this nicely organized checklist, right, for exactly how to verify step by step.
Yeah, and what I love about this checklist is I think it's when I'm debugging, it's so often like it's very hard to think about all the possibilities, but the AI has no problem in doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's a little demonstration of that architecture. So we looked a little bit about how assistant's becoming more agentic. Let's also see now how it's becoming more personalized.
Thanks, Eddie. Now I'm going to talk about the personal graph and how it's used for writing personalization. Every person has their own distinct writing style, and that style changes depending on the audience, the platform, and the purpose of the writing. In your work, tone and structure are just as important as the content, and drafts that match your personal style are easier to trust, they're quicker to edit, and they're safer to send. So we actually ran an eval on different personalization approaches, comparing distilled writing profiles, real examples, and then no personalization. We ran an LLM judge to kind of gauge, comparing these methods, how similar the resulting drafts were to the user's actual writing. And we found that when we used only the writing profile, the responses were kind of overenthusiastic and used too many emojis and things like that. But when we combined them with real examples, we ended up with something way more realistic. So we create about 3 to 5 of these clusters of profiles alongside examples, and they're derived from the types of writing that you do most and grouped by who and what the writing is for. I would love to show you my actual writing profile.
Oh,
yeah.
I want to see this.
So when it comes to my technical design and eng documentation, I'm very professional, direct, detail-oriented. Moving over to Slack, I'm definitely a little more chill. You see
Use SG.
SG, NP, LOL. And for customer escalations, I like to be very clear with step-by-step instructions for folks. And for product and feature brainstorming, a lot of like we and, what if, could we, I was thinking. So these are all real examples that I use.
And in very different contexts.
Yes, very different contexts. Yeah. So I will say that a lot of the consumer AI tools, when they say that they do personalization, it's really just one dial. It's like a temperature knob. But realistically, people are writing in all different kinds of contexts, right? If you're writing a blog or you're writing a Slack DM, you can't really compare those things. And so a dial is just not going to work. So at Glean, we use the right profile in the right context because we understand where you write and all the different things that you write about.
And again, is going back to your example, what was really cool for me was it was sourcing your writing style from a variety of different data sources, whether it's Slack channels where your writing style is very different, to tickets, to documents, and categorizing it by the writing type and audience, whether it's formal technical communication, casual conversation, business communication. And that specifically what was, I think the other really cool thing about Glean is able to not just adapt to that based on those data sources, but adapt to that over time as well, where we're constantly refreshing, looking at your latest writing style in all these, again, different contexts.
Yeah, totally. And with these fresh profiles and real examples that may be recent, we're able to really get that authentic personalization. And all of that data resides in your personal graph.